Imperva is the comprehensive digital security leader on a mission to help organizations protect their data and all paths to it. Only Imperva protects all digital experiences, from business logic to APIs, microservices, the data layer, and from vulnerable legacy environments to cloud-first organizations. With an integrated approach combining network, application, and data security, Imperva protects companies ranging from cloud-native startups to global multinationals with hybrid infrastructure. Start a free trial today and quickly protect your web applications at securityweekly.com/Imperva. Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked with Lena Lau about incident response, the complexity of kicking out compromises from the cloud, tabletop exercises, and the importance of avoiding burnout. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with John Kinsella and Akira Brand, and it's just about time for the news. But first, one announcement. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. John, Akira, normally we start off the news segment with a question from the listeners, but I actually neglected to grab one over the last 2 weeks. So listeners, please send in more questions because we need to hear what John and Akira want to have the answers for. But I don't think we'll run out of time since there's a lot of news. And I'm just going to start off with a quick one. We'll see if we can make it quick. Twitter has decided to charge for SMS or make a premium that SMS-based 2FA is just a mess. I don't even know where to go with this other than it seems like a cynical ploy to say we need to, we as Twitter need to reduce their budget for sending out a bunch of SMS messages. The framing is horrible. Putting the idea that security is something to be paid for is horrible. But the big picture is, regardless of whether you're using SMS or an authenticator app, I think from 2020, the last numbers were only barely over 2% of Twitter users are using MFA in the first place. So that seems like there's all kinds of problems here. So I don't know if we should take this anywhere or just let this little bird tweet itself to its chaotic Ed.
From my point of view, I'll pick up on one of the links you had in there for SSO-tax. I always autocomplete it. Is it .com or .org? I forget.
SSO.tax, I think, isn't it? Oh, wait.
You're right. So SSO.tax. This is something I like to. I'm more interested from this article on educating people. So most people listening to this, they've heard of us talk about SSO-tax or someone. But I like educating people outside our little space on this one in particular. A lot of startups do this. A lot of companies do this. Hell, I was talking to some investors a week or two ago that I'm consulting with, and I'm like, point them to a website. Like, this is a thing. It's actually, this is why it's not good to try and make money, but make money off a security feature like that. And I think the more people we can educate around that, that's the best we can do on that one. This is, this is a trash fire. So what can we do with this one in particular?
Exactly. We just shake our heads. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was say, I'm curious if any other companies that either one of you know of has had similar like pay to play when it comes to security features.
Oh, tons.
Well, that's very much
why,
what,
yeah. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, that's why John was talking a bit about the SSO.tax site, because it's very much the idea, especially more for enterprise SaaS applications. They say, oh, you want OAuth? You want an OIDC connection, or you want some of these other enterprise-grade security features like SSO? You can charge for them because you've got deep pockets, which there is some development work that needs to be done, but that's not the way to make the money. The money should come off of other actual features rather than security as a premium.
And I guess,
Okay, so
go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Well, you've got a question in your mind, so keep talking.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I was just gonna say for our listeners who don't know, I just found this out 5 seconds ago. SSO.tax is a website that lists out all the security vendors lists out all the companies that do kind of charge a security tax. So it's SSO.tax. Check that out. It's pretty wild.
And I bet if I look through this list real quickly, I will find security companies that are doing it too. Let's see, where was my, there's at least one other. Where I was going to go with this is, so thinking back to the previous segment with Lena, if I can see charging a premium to larger enterprises, like high-end enterprises on like the platinum version of someone's tiering, to be able to provide like that more granular data that would be useful in IR. So not so much alerting, but like if you're actually doing forensics works or investigation, maybe you could say that data is going to be a heavier cost on the vendor. I don't know. I might be reaching, but I could that it's the low end basics that really sort of at least grate me.
Yes, low end basics like MFA should clearly be. I think that's an easy one. But let's connect the conversation we had with Lena. That one aspect was talking about cookies and tokens, authentication tokens, as well as the topic of trash fires in Web3. You had a article here, John, about the wallet is the new cookie that struck you a particular way.
I snuck 2 Web3 articles in here because I thought we were going to have Tyler Robinson.
Oh, I saw
I'm
that.
always picking on him with Web3. Let's see. This one is somewhere on my list of tabs, but yeah. So, I'm sorry. Are you covering? You want to talk about the cookie one? Yeah. So Salesforce's head of Web3 came out and said that. Literally what the title is, that the wallet is going to be the cookie of the future. And I don't know, to me, I don't think of a cookie as a good thing. I mean, from an application developer point of view, I can see the want to store state on a browser. And he might be talking loosely when he uses the phrase cookie. And I know we've got the secure cookie bit and blah, 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 and you can make cookies more secure. But my goal in life is not to have something be the browser cookie, right? My goals are, I am a little bit higher than that. So I'm not a huge fan of Web3, and I'm not a huge fan of cookies, and these two together, it's not like chocolate and peanut butter to me.
No, it's one of those things that I'm just going to say. I know Web3 also wants some decentralized identities, but just I'm struggling to be kind to these articles. So I'll see if Akira has any comments she would like to add there, or maybe we can get the other Magic Link one out of the way as well, John, and move on to other things. Akira, any words you want to throw in on that topic with cookies?
I think we should go on to this other Web3 article. This is brutal for Web3 people.
Magic links, then, John. All right, you threw these in there. We're going to make you have to deal with them.
So this one is potentially interesting. So again, headline: crypto wallet firm defense says Magic links have critical vulnerability, and this is partially. There's a bit of noise around this article for a few different reasons. I think it's a he. I'll say they. They gave the vendors who might have a vulnerability 3 days head notice before publishing this. But at its core, it's interesting to me. I've had a few folks over the last year go, hey, John, how do we want to add magic cookies to our application. How do we go about, what does that look like? What do I need? What pieces do I need, right? It looks cool when you see Slack or someone else using it, but how do I actually make that work in my application? So I know there's a lot of interest out there for it. And I think the interesting part here is there's potential to implement it incorrectly. And so he's not, and I'll walk through what the deal is here. But he's not saying exactly how he's doing it, but what he's done is he's come up with a way, specifically for some of the Web3 companies that are doing magic links, where usually, so just walk through the workflow real quickly. Usually, if you want to go and log into Slack, you go to Slack, you give a username, it emails you back almost like a multi-factor token, yeah? They mail you back a unique magic link. You click on that, you're logged into Slack, and there you go. So that's the normal use case. And that, like I said, it works for CoinDesk and a few other places in the Web3 space. What this guy has come up with, this person has come up with, is a way to apparently generate those links and have them sent to, say, Akira. So then when Akira clicks on it to log in, or for whatever reason she thinks she wants to log in, I'm now able to have access to her stuff. So it's basically a phishing vulnerability, or that's the way it would be leveraged. He's not saying specifically how he's getting that link generated. Apparently it's across multiple different products out there. So maybe it's in like a framework or library that people are using, but so that's the overall thing. But I brought it up here from the point of view for AppSec in general, of like when we create magic links or something like that, how do you imagine thinking through that scenario of like, not just Akira goes and wants to log in and gets a magic link and then she's logged in, but John goes and wants access to Kira's stuff and sends her a magic link somehow, and she now gets it to him. So I think that there's a bit of a threat model to be talked through there as we use these things.
Yeah, and it's a great tie-in, again, to the conversation we had with Lena about the idea of OAuth grants or the types of tokens within the OAuth dance, and can they be intercepted, reused, abused, and so on. To me, I just look at this article and think, we have something like WebAuthn that has some better cryptographic binding of a token to the server that you're connecting to, as well as the client, and it's pulling out of trusted enclaves. And I think we already have some good solutions. So if you hadn't noticed, listeners, a bit of my bias here or observations on Web3, this sounds like the type of solution in search of a problem. With the point, though, that John did make about there are broader issues here around threat modeling of tokens and URLs or tokens and reuse. How can they be handled, replayed, and protected? So I will absolutely acknowledge that. Another thing I will acknowledge is that maybe a pair of articles here. Once again, we'll come to some that you've had, Kira, but John had one about security testing, and I had one about very specific security testing. It was pretty cool about server-side prototype pollution. Now, in this one, for me, the server-side prototype pollution was neat because it's a good introduction of overview of what prototype pollution is. It's very JavaScript specific to the language about clobbering the prototype-based language, and essentially forgetting like arbitrary code execution. But what was neat was the researcher from Portswigger talked about, how do I make these payloads safe? How do we look for server-side prototype pollution that isn't going to completely DOS the site? Now, if you DOS the site through a single request, that's a security flaw there, but that's not the friendly way of testing for this. So it was really neat to see them go through and say, here is a particular payload that's safe. Here's essentially like the console log version of just indicating that this vulnerability is present without having to nefariously or maliciously exploit it in a way that could potentially take down the site. And that leads to other types of testing, like safe testing for blind SQL injection, for that matter. Do you use an OR 1 = 1, or do you use a sleep method to identify it? As well as one other thing that comes to mind in terms of safe testing is with cross-site scripting, I mentioned like console log instead of popping up alert messages. But that's one aspect of testing. John, your article from Adobe was talking about something a little bit different in terms of security testing, but maybe in the same general neighborhood. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think one real quick thought on that safe testing, I would want to be careful with how it's being, how someone is executing that model from the point of view of using one of the examples you said there, the sleep example, Mike. If someone's just testing the OR 1 = 1, would there be a possibility for me to go in and DOS the site later, or excuse me, a malicious user, obviously not me, to go in and DOS the site later by using the sleep part? I mean, that's the part that someone has to be a little careful when they're thinking through that type of thing. Adobe, yeah. So our friend and everyone's friend, Shannon Leitz, is over there now and had a blog post, which it starts off sounding really interesting, but like I think the second half is way cooler. But the post is on a safer digital experiences start with smarter testing, and it talks through like basically they're trying to test their suite of products and be a little more sort of intentful about doing that, right? But then at the bottom they go introducing Adobe securability reports. And maybe that's not meant to be the bottom, but that's just the way I took it from the way the intro is done. But this is the part which to me is super interesting. So they've got this site now called the Adobe Trust Center. And I'm clicking on it, it's a little slow, so sorry. But so out here they've got incident response program overviews, again, call back to last half, application security programs, operational security programs, so a bunch of PDFs on like that type of thing. Then you can get SOC 2 bridge letters. I mean, we're talking about, there's 10 pages of documents on here, but I'm going to go ahead and filter by type, and I want to go down to securability reports, which are also known as pen tests. And they've got pen test reports at high level, but still for Adobe Campaign, Primetime, the admin console, Acrobat Sign, Adobe Commerce. The point being, I don't think I've seen this level of transparency. I don't know, guys. I don't think I've seen it anywhere else. I've seen some of these pieces on some sites, but and like I said, some of these reports have a little more detail of what was mitigated or what's been fixed, what's still there, and others are like, we tested and everything's good. Here's a signature. So it varies from product to product, but still, I think it's super cool, and I hope to see more people doing this in the industry.
Absolutely. And transparency, that's the word that comes to mind here. It seems in the spirit of the idea of just being transparent, to repeat the word, about information like SBOMs, for example, but also just seeing that Adobe is doing this is nice from a precedent perspective, because we talk a lot about incident responses and breach reports being detailed rather than saying, we take your security seriously. You actually show whether you did or what failed and explain what happened, what you've done to fix it, what's changed. Do you have details on actual records? Can you show why, or you have visibility into those records? And this is just coming from the security testing, the proactive part, rather than Lena's world of the reactive part when things have gone wrong. So I just like seeing that from that particular emphasis, both on just what they're doing, as well as encouraging this type of broader transparency within the industry. We've mentioned Lena and incident response quite a bit, and Akira, you've got an article here that I think touches on incident response, don't you?
Yeah. Are you talking about the Dole one or?
Oh, indeed.
Okay, cool. So I was gonna try to come up with a banana joke, but it was too fruity. I'm just kidding. That's not the entire thing I'm going to say.
And that's how we could end the episode right there. Excellent. Mic drop. Walk away.
Yeah. So I thought this article is interesting. So Dole released a press release that they had experienced a cybersecurity incident, and it was not necessarily clear from the press release on the scope of the incident or how much of Dole's operations had been impacted. However, other sources have reported that they had to shut down a plant for an entire day, which then impacted some availability of salads in some supermarkets. So one thing that really stuck out to me, though, in this article is that the cybersecurity incident was identified as ransomware. And from my understanding, a lot of times if a company has a ransomware incident, they will not necessarily publish that has happened because they will just pay the ransom and then not say anything. So I was curious, John and Mike, like if you had any input onto like ransomware in general, and like how much do companies actually say like, hey, we had this ransomware, as opposed to like a 0-day or a DDoS or something along those lines.
There's definitely been changes recently, and the new term for ransomware apparently is an encryption event, which sounds so much more exciting and formal. So whether it is an encryption event or ransomware, I think the overall industry trend recommendations is, one, we were just talking about being transparent. Be transparent about it. Don't pay, because that just makes things worse for everyone else. But yes, I can understand that it can get complicated, that if you do need to recover, because I think we can point to, was it Baltimore school system that was impacted by ransomware for a long time? There have been hospitals impacted by it. And I think just within the last month, there was a UK university, if I'm remembering correctly, that had to shut down classes because of a an encryption event. But I think we can watch and see that the world of Bitcoin transactions are not sustaining at least the high use or lots of payments that have been actually going out because of these. So it looks like that's becoming less successful, perhaps. I'm not sure, John, if you have something to add there, a different angle.
The really quick one on that is, my understanding is the majority of events formerly known as ransomware are never actually reported. So what we're hearing about is, and I think, Akira, you're trying to ask, like, if someone is compromised, are we hearing what the actual compromise was? Usually not too much. I think it became acceptable to have an encryption event. So I think that was and it's actually it's so devastating to the company that they can't just say, oh, we had SQL injection. So I think that's probably part of what's going on there. Yeah, I don't know. Would it? I guess the thought for our listeners, and again, feel free to catch us on Discord or wherever. Is there benefit to hearing that company X, not that they were just compromised or that data was stolen, but like was a stored SQL injection attack? Does that give us anything? I mean, I guess it lets us prepare better, but that'd be interesting to see. I'm going to keep going. Mike, you had 2 on OWASP, I think. They were from you.
Indeed.
One was about OWASP top 10 for Kubernetes. I'm curious to hear people's thoughts on this.
Yeah, for me, I liked the article from Sysdig that was just kind of summarizing and giving some additional insight on the OWASP top 10 for Kubernetes. And they broke it down into 3 themes: misconfigurations, lack of visibility, and vulnerability management, which I like. I always, it appeals to me when I see well-written, well-communicated articles. But for me, it was more of a pet peeve of, here's a top 10 list from Kubernetes. There's a cheat sheet series from OWASP that has a Kubernetes hardening guide, which is actually pretty good. So you actually can do something about this. But then there's also from the CloudSec list, in one of their recent issues, in fact, had a link back to a 2022 article on underdocumented Kubernetes security tips. And then Kubernetes themselves have their own security checklists. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just put together all of these checklists and see what the overlap is. And is there one unified checklist? And then honestly, I just got bored and like, can't we just have default secure? So that's all I want to say on the topic. I'm sorry.
I've got more
Mike,
to add.
one more time.
What was that, Akira?
I said, Mike, if you say Kubernetes one more time.
Oh, is it my turn?
K8S.
Where were we? I didn't start talking about Kubernetes. No,
Yeah, John.
So briefly, I could pile on that one. I'm actually for once going to resist. What was concerning to me on this, of the 10, it's broken down so folks haven't seen the list, it's broken down, first 4 misconfigurations, next 3 are lack of visibility, final 3, vulnerability management. I don't know what I was expecting, but I thought having half your list be misconfigurations, just sort of, I need to roll around in my head a little more, but when I saw this, I'm like, not fully sure what I think about that. And I mean, I guess I get it. Kubernetes is this big, complex thing that if you don't configure it correctly, you run into these problems. But it just, I was thinking, like, compared to like normal OWASP, would I expect to see more talk about either injection or breakouts or sidecars or manipulation or man in the middle? Or I guess I was just expecting a different mix. Maybe that is an actual OWASP list, but that it as I said, it sat as interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's why I actually turned to the cheat sheet series for Kubernetes from OWASP, just to see, give me something meaty or something that's kind of unique or specific to Kubernetes. Because if we talk about supply chain, broken auth, outdated components, secrets management, I'll do half of them. And then like inadequate logging and monitoring, those are 5. Like we could play the game, which OWASP top 10 list is this from?
Yeah. Hey, that's an idea for like, we could do like a matrix of like a bunch of the categories down the side and then like which OWASP list is across the top.
Excellent. I thought of it first, so I'm going to ask the questions because I'll lose if I have to come up with answers. John and I will fight over that because he expressed it much better than I did. So John, since you're on the spot now, let's switch from from OWASP Kubernetes. Sorry, Akira, I had to mention it one more time, to OWASP AI and Security Privacy Guide. This is something from just one of their recent OWASP summits, I think in Dublin, a new project. And I've got some opinions, of course. We have a podcast here. Who doesn't have opinions? But Akira, John, let's get your reactions here first.
I don't know, Akira, did you look at this one or any thoughts or?
I don't have a ton of thoughts on this one, but you go first, and then I'll generate some while you were talking.
She's going to copy me again. I'm teasing. So
Oh.
I thought, I don't know. It's interesting. So I advise a startup sort of in this space, data privacy, data security, and it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely a problem. My sense is it's not getting the attention it deserves from vendors yet. Excuse me, from customers. If you think about who do you, I mean, I guess the thought of my mind as a thought experiment for all of us is who really cares about this document in a company? Is it the security person? Is the company big enough to have privacy people? Usually not, but maybe they are. So it's just there's pain there, but I don't think it's getting the level of resources yet that are needed. I mean, we talk about data breaches. We're just talking about you're just asking us about encryption events, Akira. So it's like we're definitely aware of these aspects going on, but I don't see people, at least at scale, focusing on the privacy side of things as much as hopefully they will soon.
So who would be the people that would care about this?
That's the thought experiment.
Gotcha. I was going to come to any conclusions on that one.
Well, I'll add that I care about this, but I have to admit I'm not as informed as actual experts in the field because and by giving that answer, you can tell I'm not in AI because I gave it with a lack of confidence. But that's one of the things that, talking about AI, this list, I like the list, but it is focusing on security. It says security and privacy in the title, and is focusing on more about the models and attacking the models and less about the uses of AI or where the applied AI is. And I've been curious about, the ethics, perhaps the ethics for one thing, as well as how is AI being applied. And that is a little bit of a conversation we had 2 episodes back. I think with our guest from Trail of Bits. And we've also seen this is where experts in the field, I think huggingface.io is an org that has come up about open development of AI and looking to researchers like Timnit Gebru, apologies for mispronouncing that, looking at what are the ethics here, how is AI being used, rather than just, did we secure our code? And here, to make a small metaphor to try to make sure I'm being clear about what I'm trying to explain, is the idea of we have an OWASP top 10 checklist, and did we check our components for known vulnerabilities? Do we have correct user authentication? Do we have MFA deployed? But what is the app itself? How is this app perhaps being used in terms of abuse or credit carding or these types of things? Think of it, a social media platform has a lot of whole trust and safety area to it because of the ways those platforms can be misused and abused. And so you can have a secure platform, but you still need trust and safety to how those workflows and features impact users. And that's my long-winded way of saying, I like this OWASP list, but for me, it doesn't hit the areas where I'm more interested in learning about and understanding what are the terminology we could be using, should be using, and what are the overloaded term, what are the models we should be referencing in terms of how to design and expect AI to be used within part of a solution.
No, I like the doc. I mean, it's funny. So I just saw a section on AI code reuse. And the thought that comes to mind is just wait till we have supply chain issues in our machine learning code.
Yeah.
And we're all thinking about that right now. So let's see. We're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to kick through something else. I want to touch on a tool real quick. We haven't touched on a tool recently, so I'm going to switch us back over to some web hacking. So this is, I will pronounce it FUF or FFUF or FFUF. Pick your poison there. But this is a web fuzzer written in Go that basically takes a word list or some glob patterns and applies them to HTTP client requests. And the reason you would do this is you want to find some hidden directories, some unexpected suspected directories that might be there. You might want to try to enumerate usernames, look for virtual hosts on a server, or you're just doing general security type of fuzzing for URL and post parameters, get and post parameters. So you can basically fuzz any part of an HTTP client request. Pretty cool. It's one of those types of tools that probably is a very common part of your arsenal if you're a bug bounty researcher. And I think we've even seen either a specific reference to FUF or this type of web fuzzer in some of the articles we've covered in the past that were in the Toyota and car hacking websites. We're using a lot of these Durbuster types of tools. So I wanted to highlight that. And I'm not sure if John or Kara, you've done any bug bounty research in the recent past. I'm not sure if you have, but or if there's anything else that you would questions or comments on this type of tool.
Nothing from
and with
here.
that, then let's
I
turn to maybe.
was going to say really quickly, we probably both should be doing more web bounty type stuff, right? It's a good way to learn, good way to experiment, good way to test these tools. So yeah, grab a tasty beverage on a Friday afternoon and go look at something and see what you can play with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, or if we haven't mentioned it before, bug bounties are a great way to learn and just practice. And there's also, rather than setting up yet the damn vulnerable web application or whatever the current fancy cool intentionally vulnerable app is, go look at the real world. Obviously, within the rules of the program, but the bug bounty platforms have plenty of listings out there to go use these tools and experiment with. So they're great to play with. Let's see if we can do a real quick wrap up. Talking about code, I grabbed something on Go rather than Rust, but I think, John, you grabbed something about Rust.
I did. Let's see, which one did I put in here? Oh, yes, Fish. So Fish is a shell which I've never used. Apparently, it's a Unix shell, command line shell. Apparently, it is liked by people because it has a sort of a 90s feel and theme to it. So I didn't know shells could have that, but hey. Anyways, the interesting part here, the new maintainer who picked up maintenance of the package a few years ago, a person by name, of Ridiculous Fish, not being good about that today, put in a pull request saying, hey guys, I think we should just go ahead and rewrite this thing in Rust. And the interesting part about it here is, we've seen this happen. We've seen some Rust in the commercial vendors and the cloud providers in the Linux kernels. And this is they're calling it a port, not a rewrite. But the reason I want to try and keep an eye on it, and I'm probably going to see if I can come back to it every few months, is it's a single atomic entity, not like a driver or something smaller, but a whole overall package, which they're going to go and try to rewrite into another language. They've documented pretty well just the between the PR, the discussion on PR, and then they've put a doc into the repo, which is what the PR was for, that actually talks through the pros and cons and why they want to do this and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch, right? Like just off the top of my head, they want to do it because they want to get away from memory safety, or they want to have better memory safety in the language. They were complaining, I thought it was interesting, maybe you guys can comment on C++ include files they were having problems with, which I thought was really sort of, okay. And then on the negative side, not everyone on the team knows Rust, so either go have to learn or find something else to do. You're going to be porting a whole project, so there's a pretty good chance you're going to be introducing bugs. This is, the standard Mike and me talking about when do you rewrite code. And then the third one was, come on, brain. You're probably going to have to pause feature development while the team actually goes and looks at doing the rewrite. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how do they pull it off, what issues do they run into, is it difficult or not. So yeah, I'm going to throw on a calendar and look back every few months.
Yeah, fun project for us to follow along and just observe, like you said, because we saw we had the article a few weeks ago about a port from Go, of all things, into TypeScript. And that one, they talked about the reason why, which I think echoes a little bit what you noted here, is that what are the developers familiar with, or how much do we need to educate the developers on Rust, for example, as well as just building up the tool chain. And both the Linux kernel as well as Chrome, for them to adopt Rust, significant amount of effort was put in just to making the tool chains, the build systems work, let alone write your first Hello World equivalent of it. So it'd be fun to see, like that Go to TypeScript was a very large multi-year effort that also said, no new features, we need to just do a one-to-one, where this is a small case. So it'd be kind of fun to see the time and effort just to do this type of, I'm just going to use the word refactor, since I haven't mentioned that in a while, whether it's a port rewrite or what.
I know we also had an article a few weeks ago, maybe one of you two can refresh my memory on the title of it, where they talked about kind of an example of when this went poorly and it didn't work well. Do you guys remember this one? There was like this refactor from one language to another, and it took like something like 5 years, and at the end of the day, it just like did not work out. So it'll be interesting. I guess my point with this, though, is that it'll be interesting to see if they come into any of the pitfalls that this previous article was also outlining.
If we're talking about, there's two things that come to mind. There was an article from the Pragmatic Engineer about, that was purely an engineering driven rewrite or go from a monolith essentially to microservices, and just how do you plan that out? How do you do this successfully? And had a lot of good insights. And there was also a while back from, I think, 10-year-old discussion roughly about Bind, when they made an attempt to rewrite go to a different language, and that was a set of failures in learning experiences. So we'll drop into Discord to refresh everybody's memory, but thumbs up to Akira for making those callbacks to get our listenership onto those episodes you might have missed. So I think that's probably where then we should wrap up on saying thank you to Akira for highlighting that. Akira, any final words since you want to send us out with then?
I really appreciate it. Please remind me again the URL, but the one where it had the list of companies that had the pay to play for SSO.
.tax.
Yeah, sso.tax. Just for our listeners, I just thought that was really cool. So definitely check that out, sso.tax. You will find some interesting companies that maybe you didn't know did that. So check that out.
And check out the rest of our show notes for all the other articles we've grabbed in here, and do drop into our Discord and let us know some questions that you'd like us to answer. And with that, I want to say thank you, John. Thank you, Akira. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please subscribe, hit that like button, check out the show notes, as I mentioned. And speaking of Australians, check out Clutch by Power Glove. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.